Well, thank you for inviting us to be here this evening and just say hello to you all who are here. I always admired the Congressional Black Caucus from its inception, you know, and followed even before that. There were very few African Americans in Congress, as you may know. Clayton Powell, and of course before that, the Priest and some of the others out of Chicago and Nix out of Philadelphia. But then the group got larger, 65, when John Conyers was elected. And when the foundation, when the CBC was formed, it was in '71, I believe, and there were about 8 members. And so I got involved in local politics. I was, on the East Coast, we have these political county committee, district leaders. You know, it's very old-fashioned, block by block is still the way it's done in New Jersey, anyway, in New York. Well, I think the privileges Congresswoman Lee has now of being selected by your peers to be their leader. You know, it's a tough group, you know. You know, you got a lot of people who have strong will, and therefore you have to sort of homogenize. I guess that's why, you know, milk is homogenized because it shakes it up and it's all one look. And so you really have to be able to, first of all, they have to feel that there's some confidence they have in you. And then you have to be able to move things along dealing with those individual personalities. You know, it's difficult to win a seat in the House. That's why there's only 435. So you can imagine how difficult it is then to lead that group. Well, I think that, first of all, you need to have in mind that your job is to serve the people and not for you to be served by the people. I believe that you need to be committed. You need to really feel that you want to help somebody, some community, and I think that, you know, in many instances we need to be successful in something. In other words, whether it's just being a Girl Scout leader, or if it's a PTA president, or it's just a block leader, it doesn't have to be important, but whatever you do that, you know, like they said, like Michelangelo painted, but be the best at whatever you do. And I think if you take those traits into politics, then you will, like I said, serve the people rather than expecting people to serve you. A great experience. I was a teacher in my first career and a coach. I was assistant football and track coach. And so I had opportunity to work with young people. We had a storefront, YMCA, no physical facilities, just 6 or 7 rooms in a building that was formerly like a store. And so the YMCA, the Black Y had been torn down from urban renewal, you know, in northern cities in the late 40s, early 50s. They started tearing down buildings and building up the new urban renewal. So the Court Street Y was taken up in the redevelopment, and they built a big structure downtown, but it wasn't really, blacks were not welcomed there. It was difficult to have any youth programs, that's for sure. So we had a storefront building, and I brought my football team to the storefront. The Y wanted to start getting people active, and I thought it would be a good way to get my losing team to come together, and we have some time to talk about the individual, you know, high school kids. And the YMCA, I was the first black president of the YMCA. And actually, they thought I was the youngest. Most of the YMCA presidents are retired persons. I had just turned 35, and I was thought to be the youngest, but they did find that during the Depression, there was a person who was 34, so I wasn't the youngest, but I was second youngest and the first black. But that was really what got me to see the country. I had to travel around the country, and then by virtue of being president of National Y, I became a member of the World Executive Committee. So I would have to then go to Geneva, and that's when I really got involved in chairing the World Refugee Committee back in, got appointed back in '69. So I became its member then, and then chaired it in '73. We would meet in Geneva. I traveled around the world back in through the 60s and 70s and early 80s. So when I came to Congress, actually elected in '88, I had been to over 80 countries and had many involvement internationally. So it was just a natural for me to feel comfortable in Congress, but secondly to move right to foreign affairs. My mother died when I was just a little 7-year older, and so my grandmother raised me most of during my young years, growing up to going to out of high school, going to college, and my father had to work long hours, and so but he was always there to support us, and I remember so vividly you see, I didn't get elected to Congress until my third try. And my father was always right there, and he was very wise, read a lot, and he would say, well, don't worry, when the time is right, you will get it. And so the third time, and I ran against a very strong chairman of a committee, which was very unusual, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, the late Peter Rodino, who was a congressman who led the impeachment proceedings against President Nixon, and actually worked with Barbara Jordan, and that's when she gave her great speech. He was chairing that whole committee, and so Charlie Rango was on that impeachment committee, and so the candidate, Mr. Rodino, was a very, very formidable person. We in New Jersey, though, had never had an African American in Congress. I mean, in the South, you had members in the 1860s and 1870s, and through that whole period of time until Reconstruction stopped it all, when Reconstruction ended. And then there were a number of blacks who started to get elected in the 30s and on through the 60s and 70s. We had never had an African American. I just felt that it was an unrepresentative congressional delegation from New Jersey. It had only one woman that had served, and no African Americans, no Hispanics, and it wasn't really what the House of Representatives was supposed to be. I didn't run because I was black and thought they should have a black. I just ran because I thought that we needed to have a representative delegation to represent the total needs of all the people. And so on my third attempt, I was elected, and I felt so good because my father, who was there each of the other times when I was unsuccessful, he was there. I had him at the first row, right in the center of the balcony where visitors go, and he was there to see me sworn in as a member of the House. And actually 3 months later, he passed away, but it looked like he was just going to stay there until I got there. Once I got there, he felt that he could leave me then. And so that was the first day when I looked up, and he had just a very content look on his face, and that was the highlight of really of my life. Well, we live in a global village, and what happens around the world impacts us, our constituents. Secondly, I feel, should have a relationship to our motherland. We find in Congress it's run by groups of people who try to influence legislation and policy, and people proudly stand up for their religious group or their ethnic group. And many achievements through the Irish Americans have changed the position of Ireland and Northern Ireland because of their strong vocal work. And the Polish community with Mr. Roszkinkowski years ago did the Polish American Fund, which gave great economic opportunities to Poland when they came out of the Iron Curtain. And there are just examples all over our Congress. The Jewish community has very strong a lobby group. And so we in the Congressional Black Caucus feel that we ought to advocate for Africa the same way that other groups do for their native and homelands. And so I think it's important. And since we live in a global village, and what happens throughout our nation, and now that we have so many members of Congress, it's important that we connect the domestic with the international. And like I said, American products should be sold abroad. I've been to openings of your company's establishments 20 years ago in Africa, and so to see the employment that it creates and the all of the positive things that it's done for those countries, but also for employment here in the United States. Well, that was really a great honor. It was certainly at a time where following the Iraq incursion, and so it was a time that, and the process goes where your house, your party selects the person they feel can best represent them and forwards the name to the president, and he though has the right then to forward those names. There's one Democrat and one Republican, and it's done every 2 years. And so I think I was probably the only one member of Congress that was ever appointed 2 consecutive terms. The Senate goes in the alternative year, and so it was really a fantastic honor. And to be at all of the opening sessions of the UN, that's when Millennium Goals were founded. About Millennium Goals said by 2015 we're going to have the hunger statistics reduce poverty by 50%. There are Millennium Challenge goals, and I was involved in the UN at the time that these worldwide goals were set for different categories. And so it was a wonderful and fantastic time. And even prior to that, I was invited to attend a UN session that Mr. Nelson Mandela, when he addressed the UN on his first trip to the United States of America. And I was in the box with Mrs. Mandela and Mr. David Dinkins, and it was the African and Caribbean delegations that suggested that I be in these boxes of 6 with Mr. and Mrs. Dinkins, Mrs. Mandela, Mr. Mandela, and myself. So I've had some fantastic honors, and even lately on the transatlantic slave trade was a bill that I had passed through the Congress to have remembrance of the 200th anniversary of the ending of transatlantic slavery. I used to collect poetry out of the newspaper, and he used to put them in a binder. And I remember just when I was very young, I opened it up and I saw the beginning of a poem, and I still remember it. It must have been 70 years ago. It's that a father wants his son to be a better, brighter man than he. and then it goes on. And I always remembered that as I grew up as a little boy. I was a newspaper boy, and in those days you all had to do some work and things like that. And but my father always taught us it's hard work, certainly respect. You know, in those days it was yes ma'am and no ma'am, or we used to say gnome and yes'm, you know, sort of shorten it. And you had responsibilities. Your bed had to be made. You know, you did the dishes at dinner time. You didn't put your elbow on the table. You didn't speak until spoken to. You went to Sunday school. You didn't have many clothes, but they were washed out and clean when my mother was living. My father told us, but be proud, you know, be proud of what you do. And so those are the things that my father, hard work, it just made a better person. It like I said, never forgot that poem. Father wants his son to be a better, brighter man than he.
Well, thank you.